Have you ever encountered Twinks in your journeys before, Tarnished?
Excuse me, what?
And no, not those Twinks.
Take your twink and get the out of here!
I'm sure you've heard about them at some point during your journeys. By twink, I mean gamers playing in low levels using equipment and abilities that you can only get late in the game. An example would be someone using Rivers of Blood while invading low-level players in Limgrave. Even if Rivers of Blood is not the best option to invade at low levels, this guy would technically be a twink, because he's using a weapon that you can only obtain in Mountaintop of the Giants. Normally, Twinks in Elden Ring tend to play around level 30, and depending on how many weeks the gamers have spent without showering, they can range from a simple invader having fun to the most disgusting inhuman piece of fecal matter that has ever walked this earth. Oh! But what if I told you, my little indestructible Twinkie, that Twinks used to be much worse? Twinks have been the subject of controversy across Souls games history, since the beginning of Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 actually. What you today know as a Twink is merely an extremely nerfed shadow of its former self, because in the past they were an absolute nightmare. So let's take a look. Twinks in older Souls games, compare them to a few examples in Elden Ring, and find an answer to the question, are Twinks really evil cunts in Elden Ring? Let's go. Before we jump into our journey, the mystery weapon from our last video was the Weathered Straight Sword. Big congrats to the little poggies that answered correctly. Stay tuned until the end to play another game of Mystery Weapon. Back in Dark Souls 1 days, Twinks were at what many people would agree was their most powerful. Unlike Elden Ring, Dark Souls 1 matchmaking only took into account your soul level, not your weapon level, meaning that as long as you stayed in low soul level, you could invade low-level people, while carrying fully upgraded weapons. Imagine if you were simply a level 20 mage running around Limgrave when suddenly a dude with a fully upgraded pre-nerf Rivers of Blood shows up. If he manages to land a hit on you, it's gonna hurt. But even then, we can say that Rivers of Blood needed stats in order to deal super big damage, right?
That's the neat thing. You don't.
Well, in Dark Souls 1, there were some infusion types that removed scaling but heavily increased the base damage of weapons. These were the Raw Infusion, Lightning Infusion, and Chaos Infusion. Chaos specifically was super strong because not only the weapons had huge base damage, they also scaled with passive humanity, which was another thing that wasn't taken into account by the matchmaking system. There was also the Pyromancy Hand, which required no stats at all, and Pyromancies, which dealt huge damage based on your Pyromancy Hand. Basically, getting invaded by one of these Chaos Twinks was almost a guaranteed game over. Dark Souls 2 introduced soul memory into the mix, which was the sole thing taken into account by the matchmaking system in an attempt to put a stop to the twinking problem. Soul memory was basically the total amount of souls you've picked up during your whole playthrough. There were a lot of issues with this mechanic, which we are going to explore in depth in another video, but there's only one thing to know. It didn't work. Twinks were still a thing as weapon matchmaking didn't exist yet, and making an optimized twink build was quite easy for experienced players. It wasn't until Dark Souls 3 where we started to see a huge nerf to twinks with the introduction of weapon matchmaking. This time, if someone invaded you, their weapons would have a similar power to yours. They were still a bit of an issue, but not even nearly as disgusting as they were before. Dark Souls 3 is much more similar to what Elden Ring is right now, so we can leap back into the present already. I understand that you may not be comfortable with the idea of twinks running around, ruining the fun of unsuspecting players. Well, Waifu also ran some tests with a friend by pretending to be little goobers that don't know any better at level 30 with unupgraded weapons to test how invaders react to them, to see if they're playing around or if they're unwashed, bloodthirsty losers. And to their surprise, almost all of them were pretty nice people, like this guy called Tutorial Invader, who showed to not only have skill, but also a nice sense of humor and sportsmanship. He even asked them to gank him, because that's what it's all about. Fun times! Sometimes you will find gamers running thematic builds. Sometimes you will find cosplayers of NPCs or other characters. And yes, sometimes you will find people trying a bit too hard against two seemingly new players, like this Relsnir guy here. Dude spawned in and he didn't see new players, he saw fresh meat. Too bad this meat knows how to fight. A blue hunter joined the fun-spamming pew-pews against the blood-stained turd, and even with unupgraded stuff, the fight goes pretty well. However, the rotten tomato pulled out his big boy battery-powered dildo and electrocuted the hunter's ass to oblivion, leaving OnlyWaifu and the host to fight the angered red tumor. But as you can see, it's nothing that a bit of game knowledge, well-leveled vigor, and good teamwork can't deal with. I guess he really was just scummy, because after losing that one, he disconnected from the second one.
I have never felt such
Twinks have always justified themselves by saying that the reason why they carry the most disgusting builds known to man in low level is to counter over-leveled phantoms, or phantoms in general, as it is true that being outnumbered is an issue when invading. And it's also true that in Souls games, usually the host is just strolling around, drooling without a thought in his head, while he's being carried by a babysitter, going as far as having a host with endgame gear, but also sucking a huge donkey ball sack at the game. This guy is carrying around a bloody Helis, obtained in Mohg's palace, an Eclipse Great Shield, and Godfrey's armor. But he is also the living proof of the fact that having endgame gear means absolute jack shit, since that won't make up for having only 11 hours of game experience. If we take into account the definition of twink, would this guy also be considered a twink? Is he twinking? Because he has the gear, you could say, but if he were to invade, he would be pulverized. So what defines twinking then? The gear or the skill? However, over-leveled phantoms are not always the case, and some twinks use the most disgusting shit against regular PvE players. What these overfilled lard containers don't seem to understand is that while you can twink, you don't need to use the most disgusting shit against every living creature you encounter. And for that, I have a few examples, courtesy of our favorite Jester. In this clip, the Stormvile Jester visited the world of a lone host who was nesting in a little corner in Stormvile, kind of like a scaredy cat. Instead of brutally massacring him without mercy at first sight, the Jester notices that the host is scared shitless. So it throws a little gesture and a little bow to see if the host comes out of his nest. After that doesn't work, the Jester tests the water by throwing a little heat through the wall to make the scared little kitten come out. There he is, in all his glory. Let's turn on the lights so you can see him better. Good! After a couple of hits, the Jester clearly tells that the host has no vigor, no friends, and no balls. So it tries to soothe his fear by doing a little wiggle dance to no avail. The guy doesn't seem to understand that we're all friends here, attacking anything that approaches him. Even after leaving a gift on the ground and pointing at it like saying, "Please, for the love of all that is holy, just pick this up," the guy does not trust the Jester at all. So the Jester did what had to be done and put the scared stray cat to sleep. But at least there was an attempt, instead of directly running at him with Scarlet Rot and double Naginatas. Sometimes the opportunity for clean play presents itself in a perfect way, so you just have to take it. Just remember to always be respectful at the end of the ordeal. And other times you can just play around and pretend to be a nice little Jester that only wants the best for the host and their babysitter, earning their trust enough for them to send the blues home, only to trick them into the worst fate a Redditor could ever have. A bath. Of course, sometimes the opportunity to use the strong stuff presents itself. Like when you're fighting over-leveled phantoms. Those are the situations you keep your strong stuff for, not to just use them against any poor sucker you come across. And after eliminating the threat, you revert to just playing around. At the end, it all boils down to a human factor. You know, the idea of playing in low levels is to have the capability to choose, either goof around when you want, and to go all out when there is a huge threat in front of you. Either way, you're having fun. as opposed to meta-level invasions where the only thing you receive for your troubles is a huge dose of hair loss.
Like, kurwa, look at this f***ing compelling gameplay of this just sitting with his pew garbage on the side and just f***ing throwing the shit at you. This is so f***ing incredibly dog shit. You f***ing come here. You are so f***ing annoying garbage.
Because although the skill level of the majority of players doesn't change at all between low level and high level, it is much easy to get blended into oblivion.
Same parry. What the fuck?
In Elden Ring, twinking like in Dark Souls 1, where beating a twink was nigh impossible, can't be done. It's just people that like to play in a bracket where the odds are not tremendously against them, and they just want to have fun with either goofy builds or silly weapons. They want the more fun experience, while also showing possible new players that not all invaders are unwashed losers. But yeah, some of them really are assholes.
Progress! Science!
It's secret weapon time! Judging by the stats alone, what weapon is this? Leave your answers in the comments below, and the winners will be featured in the next video. And if you enjoyed this one, feel free to leave a like, a comment, and share it with friends. Consider subscribing to OnlyWaifu for more videos like this. Don't forget to wash your face when you wake up in the morning. And as always, thanks for watching!